The night air hung heavy over Black Hollow. Thick, swirling fog crept across the ground like fingers grasping at the legs of the young scouts who had ventured into the forgotten woods. Their lanterns flickered in the distance, casting fleeting shadows on the trees that seemed to grow unnaturally close, as though they were trying to crowd the small camp into submission. Scoutmaster Miller, fresh-faced and eager, marched ahead, his steps echoing with a naive confidence. He had heard the rumors, the whispers about Black Hollow being cursed, haunted by the ghosts of campers long gone. But they were just stories, he thought, meant to frighten children. The boys, 5 of them, each wearing their freshly pressed uniforms with wide eyes filled with excitement, seemed eager to prove themselves. They were going to survive the wilderness, face their fears, and return as heroes. The trees of Black Hollow were ancient, their bark twisted in unnatural patterns, gnarled limbs reaching like grasping hands into the murky sky. The camp itself was forgotten by time, an old scout's retreat that had been abandoned decades ago, after a series of strange disappearances. The land was said to be cursed, but to Miller, it was simply a place for a rite of passage. "We'll set up camp near the lake," Miller said, voice a little too bright, as he glanced nervously at the woods that pressed in on all sides. The boys followed his lead, though their eyes darted nervously toward the shifting shadows, sensing something was wrong. As they unpacked, the air grew still. The only sound was the rustling of their tents and the quiet whispers of the wind. The lake, once pristine and inviting, now lay dark and lifeless, its surface like a mirror to some unknown world below. There were no birds, no insects, only the oppressive silence of Black Hollow. That night, around the campfire, Miller told them tales of survival, of testing their strength and bravery. The firelight flickered and danced, but the woods beyond seemed to darken, as though something unseen was watching. The scouts sat huddled together, the flame their only comfort. One of the boys, Tommy, suddenly froze, his face paling. He pointed into the trees. "What's that?" The others laughed at first, thinking it was a trick of the light. But Miller, with a cautious glance, followed Tommy's finger. There, deep within the shadows of the trees, a pair of glowing eyes stared back at him, unblinking. They were too high for an ordinary animal. Tommy's voice quivered. "It's watching us." Miller chuckled nervously, dismissing the feeling that tightened around his chest. "Probably just an owl. It's nothing." But as the fire crackled, the feeling in the air grew heavier, like the trees themselves were holding their breath. And then, from the darkness, came a rustling sound, a low, guttural growl that sent a chill through their spines. "Stay close," Miller ordered, his voice shaky, but the boys barely heard him over the sound of their own heartbeats. As the night wore on, one by one, the creatures made their presence known. First, it was the eyes glowing, far off, always just out of reach. Then, it was the sounds, a snap of twigs underfoot, a whisper in the wind, and the unmistakable sensation of being followed. But when they tried to move, when they attempted to escape into the trees, the creatures revealed themselves. They were not the animals the boys had imagined, but something darker, more twisted by the cursed land itself. Mutated beasts, their forms grotesque and unnatural, some with too many limbs, others with faces that twisted and contorted in shapes no creature should ever make. Their glowing eyes pierced the darkness, cold and unblinking, and their presence suffocated the scouts like an unbearable weight. One by one, the creatures picked them off. First, it was Billy, who wandered too far into the woods and never returned. Then it was Tommy, whose terrified scream echoed through the trees before falling silent. Miller tried to maintain order, tried to call them back, but his words seemed meaningless in the face of the growing horror. Each scout who was taken vanished without a trace, dragged away by the unseen hands that seemed to fill the night with unspeakable things. And still, the creatures watched. By the time the sun began to rise, Miller was the last one left. He hadn't slept, he hadn't dared close his eyes. The woods had become a labyrinth, each path twisting and turning in impossible directions. The creatures had circled the camp, always watching, but never attacking when the light touched them. Yet Miller knew once the sun fell again, it would begin. He had to leave. He had to survive. But when he finally stumbled toward the old camp's exit, a strange sound reached his ears, low, mournful. A voice, or perhaps several voices, calling his name from the deep forest. His heart pounded in his chest. It was Tommy's voice. Billy's. The other scouts. But the sound was wrong, distorted, like a dream slipping away as he tried to hold on to it. "Don't leave us," the voices whispered, echoing from all around. Miller froze. For a moment he thought he saw them as scouts standing just beyond the trees, their eyes glowing in the deep shadows. But then, the forest seemed to shift, and they were gone. With a shudder, he turned, only to feel the ground shift beneath his feet. The trees themselves seemed to close in, trapping him. The hollow-eyed creatures were now all around him, their bodies writhing, their claws scratching against the dirt. As darkness overtook him, Miller realized with a hollow dread that the woods were alive. The forest didn't want to let go of Black Hollow, and now neither would he. If you like this story, and for more dark stories, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. See ya!